Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. And to be honest, I do wish that I was a doctor. It would make my name that much cooler, and I probably would get a show shortly thereafter. But I wanted to start this conversation actually with the argument that I had with my wife yesterday. You see, last night we were having a conversation about how we should start this particular message, right? And we started to argue about, well, we weren't arguing, we were just having a really tough conversation, and we spent about 18 minutes trying to figure out what would be the best way to paint the perfect picture of what health is like here for African Americans in America. And I lost that argument. As a matter of fact, I lost it, it was for a good reason. Because instead, I want to challenge you the same way that my wife challenged me to think about the statistics not as a means of woe, but as a tool to unlock an ecosystem of health solutions. You see, last year, I started working on Yama Health. And the reason I started to work on Yama Health is because I looked at the research that existed and found that African Americans are 2 times more likely to go to the emergency room for primary health care needs. And what does that mean for an African American? What does that mean for the patient? You see, the emergency room is essentially built for triage. And the triage is ultimately to do one of 2 things: either provide that person with an opportunity to get checked into the hospital, or to ultimately create a space for them to get checked out of the hospital. But what that means for the person, though, is that what potentially may be a much larger, a much bigger issue for them may go unchecked because they haven't had the opportunity to get checked at a deeper level, because they're only getting checked at this triage level. What that means, though, is that most African Americans, people who are going to go and check into the ER, find themselves in a space where they are looking at their doctor only for emergencies, or considering their doctor to be no good. Also, here's another fact. Did you know that 22% of African Americans feel like they have no choice in who they see as their medical health care provider? To put a point on this, that's about 9 million people across these United States who feel as if they don't have a choice on who they can share their deepest, darkest fears, problems, issues, and concerns with. And to me, that's a big issue. That's something that we are trying to make sure at Yama Health doesn't continue. And the reason that this is important is because there are so many people across these United States who are looking at their doctor as if there's a person who can't provide them with real solutions. I was having a conversation the other day with the VP over at ProMedica Health, one of the largest health systems in Northwest Ohio. And he came to me and he said that, Phil, we work in the business of trust. Trust is our currency. And I realized that if trust is the currency of the medical system, then many of the people that you are looking to serve in the African American community do not think that that currency is worth anything. And so my goal in developing Yama Health was to be able to create a space where we can, 1, develop a trusting relationship between a patient and a doctor, and 2, make it so much easier for African Americans or people of any complexion, color, or creed to find a doctor who is African American. But I say all of this to not just paint a picture of sadness or to paint a picture of us not being able to find real solutions. I say all of this because ultimately what I have found is that this community is a community of individuals who have the ability to be an addressable market that we have never really taken a look at. And so what I want to do through Yama is make it simple, make it easy for more African Americans to find a doctor. Why is this important to me? This is the hard part of this work for me. So in 2019, my wife and I were pregnant. This is going to be my first son. And my wife, who is the strongest person I know, was actually on a stage like this, presenting. She was talking about turning young people into global citizen scholars. She was there to talk about a time where she went to Prague and she shared her very first opportunity to teach global citizens. And I was there, I was in the crowd, and I was watching my wife. And what I realized, maybe 20, 30 minutes into the conversation, is that my wife's voice shuddered. And I was like, we're a little bit too late to be nervous. We're a little too far into this conversation for you to be afraid. I knew at that moment that something was wrong. What I found out later is that my wife was actually, at that very moment, having contractions. 3 hours later, my son was born, and he didn't make it. The thing that bothered me the most about this, though, is that when we made it to the hospital, my wife was admitted through the emergency room. We were actually carted to 2 different hospitals while my wife was in the middle of contractions. And as my wife was beginning to have my son, the doctor wouldn't let me into the room because he said, baby fathers are not allowed in the delivery room. Now, we've been married for 4 years. I wear my ring everywhere. And at that moment, I was also wearing my ring. And I realized that I was experiencing racism inside of healthcare. So even as I pushed past this person, even as I saw my wife in the most pain that I've ever seen her in her life, and she just fought through, I realized that this is unacceptable. The facts are this: African American women die at 4 times the rate of their counterparts when giving birth. 4 times the rate. What's even more concerning is that when that same African American woman has a college education, it is 5.2 times the rate. Let that sink in for a moment. So what do you do when you go and do the research and you find out that African American people are living in a perpetual pandemic state? And the people that are supposed to help them, the people that are supposed to save them, the people that are supposed to provide them with solutions and resources aren't there for them. As a matter of fact, they feel like the people who are trying to save them put them in a worse space. When I think about Yama Health, that is the reason that we were created. Because I didn't want to see more women die because they didn't have a good relationship with their doctor, because they were afraid to have real conversations with their doctor. And the thing that I challenge all of you who are watching this now, the entrepreneurial community here in Cincinnati, I encourage you to begin to create solutions for this system that currently is broken. Yama is just one part of a much larger ecosystem that can help save lives. And not only will it help save lives, it'll probably make money too. If you were to just simply look at the research, because I'm a researcher, if you were to simply look at the research, you'll find that hospital and healthcare systems run on razor-thin margins. As a matter of fact, in 2020, the median operating margin for a hospital was 0.5%. The year before it was 2.4%. The year before that it was 6.4%. Did you also know that the inequities that exist inside of hospital systems and healthcare systems actually cost hospitals $93 billion per year? And that's simply because of inequities. That is a huge opportunity. That is an addressable market. And what I want the entrepreneurial economy, the entrepreneurial ecosystem to do is to go full force into this space and create as many possible solutions as you could think of. What can you do with technology to solve this issue? What can you do with technology to be able to create solutions that will not only help African Americans, but will help all people? Because the equity doesn't just stop with black people. The inequities don't stop with black people. They don't even start with black people. They start with women. They start with different genders. They start with ageism. They start with all of the different isms. Now the question becomes, how can we create solutions for this space? Again, I challenge you, because it's a market that exists, that is needed, that needs solutions. Let's create this ecosystem together, entrepreneurs. Let's save lives. Let's help people. Let's build. Thank you.
Wow, what a powerful, powerful message we just heard. I know that I'm always touched when I hear Phil's story, and I hope that you guys were too, and you guys can see how much of a problem this is in the Black community and how we really need some innovative solutions to try to solve them. Phil, it's known that patients receive better health care when they can advocate for themselves. But I know a lot of people don't know what that looks like. Could you give us a brief explanation on, what advocacy could look like with your doctor, or how to build that relationship to where, when you're in an emergency situation or in a health crisis, that you can really relay your problems to your doctor?
Yeah, so that is actually a really great question. One of the things that I think that a person can do right off the bat is to educate themselves. And when I say educate yourself, I don't say go on to Google and start Googling everything as it relates to whatever it is that you feel. What I would encourage you to do is to begin to have conversations with your doctor about the real symptoms that you're having. Whether that doctor is black, white, purple, or green, I would encourage you to have the courage to ask the questions and be uncomfortable in that particular situation. If you feel like, and this is something that happens all the time, and part of the other reason that I started Yama Health was because there was a research study done in 2018 by Stanford University that showed when African Americans had African American doctors, their social determinants of health went up by 130%, right? But what happened is they found is that the reason that existed is because they were having very real conversations with their doctors. Mm-hmm. So what would happen if you just had significantly more real conversations with your doctors? If a doctor tells you, and this happens all the time because doctors are strapped, there's a million things that they have to do, right? But sometimes we'll get an answer and we may not understand what the answer actually means. And so we'll just slough it off and say, oh, it must not be that important because I don't understand it, right? But what I would encourage people to do is say, hey, I don't get it. Explain it to me like I'm a 4-year-old. Because what you're saying to me right now just is not making the sense to me. I would encourage people to ask questions. I would encourage people to, once they begin to ask questions, say, what can I do about that tomorrow? What should I do about that 30 days from now? What can I do about that 60 days from now? I would also encourage you to develop relationships with specialists and ask your doctor to send you to specialists after you have a conversation about a specific issue. Because what usually happens is that your doctor will say, okay, there's a few things that are going on here. Take a Tylenol and go home, right? But what you need to do is begin to ask, like, so are there other things or other solutions that we're not discussing in this particular conversation that we could potentially be having? Is there someone else that I should have a conversation with about this particular issue?
Great. We have a little bit of extra time, so I wanted to ask, how can people find out more about Yama Health, and give us a little bit of a rundown of the platform and how it works?
Yeah, so Yama Health, you can actually find Yama online. It is JAMAA health.com. We actually just launched our website, so I'm really excited about that. But if you go to yamahealth.com, you can find the application in the top right-hand corner. You can just click the link and actually go and use the application. It is built simply for individuals to be able to go into the application and find a doctor by location, by specialty, and also just even by gender. Every single person on the application has been vetted. So all of these doctors, there will be no fraud or anything like that. Like, we take a lot of time to sanitize all the information that goes onto the application. I spend hours every week going through the application, making sure that all the doctors who have put their information in are actual doctors. Because again, if the currency of healthcare is trust, then it is important to make sure that every doctor that is submitted onto the application is an actual doctor. In addition to that, we have also created a space for doctors to submit their own information. We'll do our vetting on the back end. Also, another thing that I would encourage everyone to do is that if you do have an African-American doctor, or if you know an African-American doctor, I would encourage you to submit their name to the Yama Health application. It will be awesome to get as many doctors as we can. There's about 45,538 African-American doctors in the United States. My goal is to get at least 80% of them onto the application so that it'll be really easy for any person to find a doctor across the country.
Thank you so much for that little rundown on Yama Health, and I hope that anybody looking for a doctor is going to check out this platform and really be able to quickly find some help in a specialty field.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.